Hi, I'm Heather with the Cinema Club here at Google LA. And tonight we're excited to welcome Jerry Zucker. Of course, we were going to have the other two directors come, but they couldn't make it at the last minute. But
Hey, Jerry.
I know.
Yeah. We're really grateful and honored to have Jerry.
They don't really like you.
And some of the movies that all three of them did were obviously Airplane, but Top Secret, they did the Naked Gun series, and Ruthless People. Jerry's films that he's directed include Ghost, First Night, and Rat Race, and maybe you have others that you want to talk about as well. And so please join me in welcoming Jerry Zucker.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is an amazing. This is an amazing workspace. I don't know how any of you get anything done. I mean, it seems like every 10 feet it's either an exercise place or an eating place or a gathering place. But anyway, so what?
Put it on and work it off.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's pretty amazing. You all probably know how lucky you are to have a place like that. I mean, I don't know how they might beat the crap out of you, when you're working. But the building is great. Actually, we were all supposed to be here. I apologize for Jim had to go to a conference. Jim is very involved with pediatric epilepsy, and he went to a he had an emergency meeting in Chicago, I think, or somewhere about this conference that they're holding. Anyway, and I talked to my brother David today. Jerry. so it didn't work out. I guess I'll really mostly want to answer your questions. I'll just, I guess, talk a little bit about this film. It started when we were doing this thing called Kentucky Fried Theater, and Kentucky Fried Theater was live skits, and also we had a video monitor. This is really in the early days of video with reel-to-reel video in this big machine. It's like this big, and it is amazing because the machine was like this big and half-inch reel-to-reel and really heavy, and a big cord tethered to a camera, and it was black and white and not nearly as good as my iPhone, in terms of picture quality. So it's hard to imagine how you do that, so we used to set the videotape machine to go on in the middle of the night where some of the corniest commercials were, and because we would do spoofs on them, and one night we caught this movie called 0 Hour, which is this 1957 flying movie with Dana Andrews, Sterling Hayden, Elroy Hirsch, some fairly well-known names at the time. They probably don't mean a lot to you now, but. We were looking at the commercials, but then we kind of got engrossed in the movie. And the interesting about this movie and the whole genre, and it kind of was that we made fun of it, but we also loved it, and that sort of everything we did in terms of satire, we had to have both. We had to find it laughable, and we also had to have some affection for it. And I think you can kind of see that in Airplane. And a lot, for us, it was this really tough, hard-hitting style of drama that we grew up with, both on TV and in the movies, the B movies in particular, and the Charlton Heston School or whatever. Anyway, and so we said, gee, maybe we should make this would make a funny movie. And so we didn't really know a lot about writing movies, but we took the three of us while we were doing the show were working on it, and then we put it down for a while because we couldn't, we finished it, but we couldn't get it going. Interestingly enough, someone offered to buy it, but we didn't want to sell it because we didn't trust anybody to do it right. And even when we were nothing, I mean, we had, you know, we didn't have anything, and I think someone is offering us $200,000 or something if it got made, which is a lot of money. But we grew to love it, and we didn't want anybody to mess it up, particularly the casting, which was probably the most important thing to us. Well, two things. They're sort of part of the same thing. The casting and the tone, to play it totally straight. When we were on the set, we used to, when we spoke with the actors before we hired them, we told them all, we don't want you to play it straight. We want you to pretend that you don't know you're in a comedy. And there's a difference, because when you say play it straight, a lot of people kind of think they're playing it straight, you know, but really it's for the actor, it's still about them being funny and them making people laugh. And that's what we really wanted to rein in. You act like you have no idea that this is funny, that you think you're doing, you know, a serious movie. And that's kind of why we just didn't trust anybody and insisted on directing it. When we finally did get to Paramount and they said okay, they said they liked the script, they tried to, you know, they brought up names of current movie directors that were, you know, established, successful directors, and wanted to, you know, someone else to direct it. And we kind of said, no, we need to do that. And it was really for that reason, not that we thought, you know, we were going to be great directors, but this was our baby. And even, you know, every studio in town turned it down until we got to Paramount. And Michael Eisner was having dinner with a woman named Susan Beerwald, who was a reader at United Artists, and he said, what have you read recently that you like? And she said, well, there's this one script, Airplane, and she described the film to him and said, you know, I sent it through with high, you know, recommendations, and they passed on it. And Eisner got up from the table, called Jeff Katzenberg, and said, track this thing down, because he just thought that sounded, a comedy on an airplane was a great idea. And the idea that it was low budget. And you know, and they were great, and they were helpful. And here's another interesting thing. Eisner insisted we had written it to be done on a prop plane, because that's what 0 Hour was. And in fact, I think we wanted to do it black and white even, because we were a little too into that whole thing. And Eisner, to his credit, said, you know, no. Well, what he said was, look he said you can do it in black and white, and with a prop plane, but not at this studio. But I always, you know, I've talked to him, you know, recently, and I always thank him. You know, he was absolutely right about that. But what they never really quite, the casting, they said, okay, you can have Nielsen and Bridges and Stack, you know, because we were very insistent about that. But they wanted to put a lot of comedy cameos in it. People from actors that were in TV shows at the time on the lot. You know, Robin Williams and Penny Marshall, and all the, you know, all the Paramount TV show people and others. And you know, which we didn't really want to do, but we went through this process, and fortunately we had this great, you know, one of the producers, Howard W. Couch, he's not with us anymore, wonderful, great guy, who at first we thought, gee, the studio put him on, and we thought, oh, do we really want this old guy on this movie? And of course, at the time, he was the age I am now, but he was terrific, and he would call. He got what we wanted to do, and so he would call agents and say, you know what, I'm offering you your client this script, but it's not really going to be any good. You know, and they would pass. And the only one that we ended up with out of those was Jimmy Walker, who is, you know, with the thing, which was fine. But it wasn't until the first day of dailies that we got the call from the studio, and they said that was the first day of of shooting was Leslie Nielsen in the cockpit saying, "I am serious and don't call me Shirley," and you know, among other things. And they said, "Oh, now we get it." You know, they really. And I have to say, I don't call anybody. Most people really didn't get that, and I don't think. I don't, you know, ridicule people for that, because it was a difficult concept to understand until you really saw how it played. And for us, this was something we had done, you know, in our videos, even with younger actors, just playing it, not famous, of course, just playing it straight. So you know, we had a great experience. It was helpful for us that we were this little $3 million movie, and at the same time, they were dealing with the first Star Trek movie, which was going way over budget, so they didn't pay any attention to us, which is great. And we got the movie made. The first screening was a disaster. I mean, they brought in it was longer. It was, this movie now is 97 minutes, you know, and I think the first one was probably an hour and 50 minutes. Just, you know, we just sort of, you know, that your first screenings generally are long, and then you know, we go into, with satires, we go into every movie hoping that we have 90 minutes that are funny, you know, because you're always surprised, and that first screening is always the scariest, you know, but in this case, and we hadn't had, you know, it was our first film that we directed, so we hadn't had a lot of experience with that, but the guy whose job it was to recruit, they insisted on doing it on the lot. The guy didn't do a great job of recruiting. You know, to his defense, it's not that easy to recruit an audience of people for a comedy starring Robert Stack and Leslie Nielsen and you know, Lloyd Bridges and Peter Graves. So they ended up dragging people off the line from Mork and Mindy and, you know, Happy Days and all whatever they were shooting, and they just weren't laughing except for one guy. There was one guy in the audience. You know, he loved it, you know, and he just kept laughing. And bless him, you know, a lot of times people, they don't like to laugh if everybody else is, but this guy didn't care. He just, you know, and we edited off of one guy. You know, you usually try to figure, you want a representative, you know, you want 300 people, 500 to get a sense, because everybody doesn't laugh at everything. One guy, and so then but afterwards people were, you know, some of the people were coming out, studio people, and go, well, you know, I guess you've got a lot of work. I mean, we could see the failure in their eyes, you know, but actually, I should say there was a screening before that. That was funny too. The first time we showed it to the studio, we showed it to Eisner, and I think and Katzenberg too, and we showed it at Eisner's house in his screening room. And of course, you're not looking for big laughs, because it's just a couple of guys who have read the script, seeing the dailies, et cetera, et cetera. But his kids, who were younger at the time, were, I don't know, 8 and 10 or 12, whatever. They were in the projection booth, and you could hear them laughing through the projection booth. And Eisner, to his credit, he always had faith, you know, and even when all these people, you know, said, some of the other studio executives came out and said more, you know, negative things, and some who never liked the script and whatever were kind of saying I was right. You know, Eisner and Katzenberg always had faith in it, you know, and so we've always, you know, had a debt of gratitude towards them, no matter how much they tried to fuck us in the future. No, I'm kidding. It's not really. Well, they are studio executives, you know. I mean, you know. let me just tell you right now, Paramount didn't have a masseuse on duty. You know, it's not, it was not like Google, you know, where, you know, we want the employees to be happy. A happy worker is a productive worker. That wasn't the, you know, you could be, Paramount, you know, the studios are more the you could be fired tomorrow method of encouragement. Anyway, anyway, we finally decided we need to edit this. Our next screening would be on a college campus. And we went, where was the first screening? I think was, oh geez, somewhere, a UC campus, and forgive me, I think Davis, maybe it was. And that was like exhilarating because they just loved it all. You know, it was a better edit too, thanks to that one guy. And I should have gotten his name, you know, I should really, I'd like to call him and thank him. But he, you know, and then we did a bunch of college campus screenings, and those were great. And then, you know, it's just nothing worse than spending years of your life on a movie and feeling like it's bombing. You know, it's really a, you know, we all have a lot of, I don't know if it's the same in your business exactly, but for filmmakers, we have so much of our own personal whatever tied up in it, and our own egos and worth and all that kind of stuff, you know, that it really, it's hard. You have to learn not to, you know, because that's the way the business is for most people, but you know, those screenings were great, and then you know, pretty much from there it was fairly smooth, and it came on. It was you know, it was a hit. But oddly enough, it's funny. I don't think when we made it then we ever thought it would still be around 30 years later, and people would still, you know what I mean? And of course, we didn't know about, you know, that was before video. In those days, a movie had was called a second release or a re-release. And so they would, like 6 months later, if a movie was successful enough, they'd put it out in theaters again for people who missed it. And then it was just, you know, the television, a few networks, you know, that would periodically maybe show a movie, but there was some movies kind of died off unless they were like Wizard of Oz or some, you know, Gone with the Wind, the big movies. But you know, thanks to video and DVD now, these things live, and so it's amazing that you know, this thing that we did when we were kids with, you know, and sort of carried this, it's almost become more now than it was then. You know, in a way, it's hard for me to gauge because I'm inside it, but it feels like, I mean, people liked it then, and it was like, oh, that was cool, but I just, I didn't feel then quite like the God I do now. No. Thank you. Yeah. No, it has taken on I think a different aura. But anyway, so that's like a quick overview. But I'd love to answer questions. Any questions you have? Go ahead.
My roommate and I are great fans of all your movies, of course, and also of Police Squad. And I got to ask, Police Squad obviously led into Naked Gun, but I wonder what happened that we only have, what, half a dozen of this absolutely among the funniest television ever.
Thank you. You know, it's a funny thing about Police Squad. We had this, we insisted right up off the bat that there not be a laugh track. And so ABC said okay. You know, they wanted to do the show, and we got into it. And when it was done, they begged us to put a laugh track on it. We had contractually we had you can't do this without our permission, and so because the thing is about that kind of humor, if the whole thing is you're pretending it's not funny, so when we finished the first show, they wanted us to, they put a laugh track on, not that they thought they were just sneak something by, but they asked us, please just look at it because we think it plays much better. And we just said, no, this is not our humor. But you know, for television, they may have been right. For our show, we were right, and so we never regretted the decision. But I think the real telling thing was that Tony Thermopoulos, when he canceled it, said it didn't work because you had to watch it.
You had to focus.
You had to focus, and you know, it's true. We made it like a film, like people sit in a darkened room facing the screen and paying attention. And with television, kind of you're doing now you're texting, you're on your phone, you're doing all kinds of things. In those days, it was, you know, you're getting up to get something to eat, or you've got a newspaper there, or you're talking to some people, whatever. You're just not. And I actually heard, you know, at the time, people would tell me who were in college students would say they would all get together in the dorm at the, you know, in the lounge or whatever, and you know, 50 of them would watch it together, and it would play great, you know, because then it played like a movie in a way, and it also is the kind of thing that's, you know, it always helps to have an audience for something like that. So watching it home without a laugh track, I don't know, but for us, I mean, we had mixed feelings about it. Being canceled, because on one hand, you know, you don't like to fail at anything, but on the other hand, we didn't, you know, it was tough to keep the quality up, and I don't think we really quite did through the whole thing. I mean, I thought it was, from our perspective, was kind of a bit sporadic, some great stuff in it, but a little bit sporadic. But when you consider you spend, you know, we would spend an hour, a year to write a movie, and a year between pre-production and shooting and editing, you know, so it's at least a 2-year process making the thing. And here we're doing 24 minutes a week, you know, and you have a little more than that because you start a little earlier and stuff, but it's still really, and you're shooting and you're doing pre-production, shooting, editing all at once. It's a 3-ring circus. Plus the fact that we couldn't direct them all ourselves, we hired other people to direct it, and that was always kind of a mess because it's, once again, it's our sense of humor, you know, that kind of satire is just very specific. So it was hard to just find someone else who could go in and do that, and we were not good producers for directors in that case, because we would be saying no. We would be stepping in all the time and sort of, you know, directing and anyway.
First of all, Airplane.
I'll repeat it. First of all, Airplane.
No, repeat after me. It was one of the greatest. It is one of the greatest comic films ever made. Yes. Repeat that.
Well, thank you.
Without a doubt, absolutely one of the greatest.
What do you mean by one of?
One of? Well, it is.
Like one of how many?
It is in its own category.
1,000? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
It was followed by many unfunny films that have tried to follow in that footstep that are not even close.
Yeah.
You go there and you look at them and you say, why are these even funny, and why do people think they're funny? Because they're not, and they're not even the same category.
Bless you.
With Airplane. So, yes, it's wonderful to have all these years later to sit down with you and say that this is going to go on for another 100 years.
You're so smart. I didn't.
Well, it's in such great company.
Yeah, I didn't, you know. I mean, I knew Google was kind of a, you know, a bright company. It had to be, but this is beyond what I had ever imagined.
Wait until later. We'll get.
Okay.
Google, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Particularly the way you're dressed, I didn't expect. Anyway.
Google people don't work. Anyway, $3 million you say is the budget. It absolutely, I'm sure, held you back from having complete and total control to do anything in the world that you'd want to do. And it looked like that came across as more ingenuity. Do you feel that you were more creative under the limitations that you had at that time versus today, where 50 million would be what you'd put on the screen there, and it would look incredibly polished, but probably not be a tenth as good of a film?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. You're exactly right. There is sometimes, you know, I never want to say this to a studio, but there is some creativity gain to a lower budget, to having to do things for less money. And by the way, it depends upon the kind of movie you're making. I mean, if you're making one of these special effects, you know, movies with you know, it's a huge landscape, then I don't know if Avatar would have been helped by a smaller budget, you know. But for us, first of all, we kind of, you know, at that point, I mean, you always have budget arguments with studios, but, you know, and hopefully you arrive at something, you know, that you can work with. At the time, for us, we didn't even get the number, meant nothing to us. I mean, $3 million seemed like a lot, you know, it's a lot of money. And we were just thrilled to get out there and make the movie. And John Davison, who was one of the producers, who was, you know, and Howard Koch, we just trust that they kind of, you know, they would just say, okay, you got to do this, shoot this scene in a half a day, and this scene, and do you think you can do this and that? If not, then how can we switch around? And so, you know, and we didn't know in those days, we were too naive to know that you could actually just go over budget. And so we were actually stupid fools. We were actually hustling, trying to make our days. Anyway, no, we of course still do that, but but there is, you know, there's another element. One thing, there's a certain creativity to an energy to moving fast, but also that's also actually one great thing about shooting digitally, because you can shoot endlessly. You don't need to yell cut. You know, you can just, and the actors love it because it keeps up that energy. So you're just moving fast, I think, sometimes does the same thing. But there's another aspect to this particular film in that, I mean, we like the cheesiness, you know? In other words, it wouldn't have been as, I don't think, certainly not any better, and probably not as good if it had, you know, if it had been too slick. I mean, we liked the, you know, we were imitating a certain style, so we liked the fact that you can almost see the strings on the plane, you know, and you know, it's just kind of hanging there, so that, and I think you're also right. There's, on some level, there's actually an appreciation to doing that. So anyway.
So the other night I was watching Enter the Dragon with my teenage son and couldn't keep a straight face because my parents ill-advisedly took me to see Kentucky Fried Movie when it came out. And I was just hoping...
Your face isn't that straight anyway right now, if I can comment. No, sorry, go ahead.
I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about the Kentucky Fried Theater and the origin of that film.
Okay, well, Kentucky Fried Theater, we were all at the university in Madison, the University of Wisconsin, my brother and Jim Abrams and I. And we started this theater. Actually, we had seen this thing called Groove Tube, which was this, you know, a guy named Ken Shapiro got a hold of, had some videotape equipment, and he made some, you know, a bunch of funny videos. And what he would do is rent a theater and do some advertising, and you'd come in, and there'd be, you know, these bunch of chairs in front of a television monitor or a few monitors around, and he'd actually put a couple refrigerators in there where you could go up and get a soda or something, and the idea was that it was stuff that you couldn't, it was TV, but that you couldn't see on TV, because, you know, this was before, you know, cable, and so television was pretty chaste, and but these were all, you know, spoofs, and some of them were pretty scatological and R-rated and whatever, and you know, we thought, well, just we can do this. Actually, the story is prior to this, a family friend, a friend of my parents, worked there, had a sick room service company where they rented out, wheelchairs and that kind of thing. And he had this videotape machine that he would use to demonstrate some of the stuff. And my father thought, he said, I talked to Bill, and he said he would let you use this. Dave, he's talking to my brother now, who's older and already had graduated, and at the time was working for my dad as a construction expediter. Anyway, and he said, you could use this and make industrial videos, because he knew David wanted to get into something with, film. And industrial videos were not exactly what David had in mind. But then when David saw this groove tube thing, he drove all the way up to from Chicago. He saw it in Chicago. Drove up to Madison and started talking a mile a minute. Jerry, we got to do this. This weekend. And so we got a hold of the videotape equipment, and actually David just ran into Jim Abrams in Milwaukee, and Jim at the time was working as a private investigator for a law firm, and the three of us found ourselves in the basement of our house with this videotape equipment, and just having a blast. And it was the greatest thing, because you could, even though it was that machine I described earlier in black and white, but you could play it back right away. You didn't have to send it out to be developed, and there was no cost to it. I mean, unless you bought another reel of tape, but even that wasn't very much, and you could erase it, and it was just like, we just had a blast, and we laughed, and it was the most fun thing. And then at some point we said, well, we got to show this to people, or we did show. So we collected a reel of these funny things that we had done. We showed it to people, and they laughed, and we said, okay, we got to do something. We got to put this. It was like Mickey, Rudy, and Judy Garland. Hey, let's do a show. So anyway, it's a long story, but finally we got it all together. We opened it at the University of Wisconsin. There were a bunch of live skits, and then a bunch of videotape, and a little bit of film stuff. And it was just anything goes. This was 1970, and it was just at the time that it was okay to laugh again, because this is just post, Vietnam protests, and everything at that time was very political. The committee, the Second City, these groups would do a lot of political material, and we were just, zany. We didn't do any political material really, and got skewered for that occasionally in reviews. But basically the show is a success. We weren't making a lot of money on it. But enough to buy more equipment. But we all had I was in school, and Jim and David had jobs and stuff, and so we at some point it became not just a lark, but like, we're really into this, and we don't want to stop this, so we can't make a living from it here, so let's go to Los Angeles. So we packed up everything in a big U-Haul truck, the boards from the stage, the costumes, the wiring, and we moved out to Los Angeles and did the show there. And so now to skip to the movie, actually, when we first came to Los Angeles, we didn't know what we wanted to be. I mean, a performing group, television, writers. I don't think we ever thought of ourselves really so much as directors. We turned to that sort of because we wanted control of our material, but not because we were like born to do that. Which is pretty obvious if you look at any of our movies. But at some point we said, okay, film really is our medium. It's where we can take time, and I don't know, it's just, we're not that prolific. We really like to, it takes time to get, we wanted to be able to take the time to get it right and have something that would last and not just, disappear after a week or whatever. But so David saw John Landis, who directed Animal House and the Blues Brothers and all those films. But this was just after his first movie, Schlock, and he was on The Tonight Show because he was a 21-year-old kid who had directed a film. And David thought, geez, 21, maybe he'll talk to us, you know? And because we didn't know anybody still, and we had done this all, but we didn't, you know, we didn't know anybody in the movie business. And so David called him, and he was nice enough. He invited him to the show. He came to the show, and then we took him out to lunch. And I remember he gave us we said, how do you write a movie script? And he gave us this script to American Werewolf in London, you know, which happened much later, you know. But you know, so we used the form, and that's when we started to write the first draft of Airplane. And then when we couldn't get that going, we decided that maybe a way to get a movie going was to do a really low budget, you know, film of different bits. And there had already, GrooveTube had done that and been successful. So again, we followed in the steps of GrooveTube. Does that answer your question more than you ever wanted? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, since you've directed, you know, with a trio and by yourself, kind of the differences and, you know, and what it's like to have three, you know, directing with two other people with you.
When you direct by yourself, you get all of the credit and all of the blame. And it actually is really good to share both. Ironically, it's great. In the days of success, it was great to go, all right, you know, guys, decide, because you can't just go out in public and say, hey, I made that movie, you know. So it's just sort of, we had and David and Jim and I, we grew up together. We were, you know, David and our brothers. It was, you know, it was a great trio. You know, not that we didn't argue and, you know, beat each other up a little bit, but we really, we loved each other and we needed each other, and it was great. I think what happened is eventually, particularly when we stopped doing satire, I mean, Ruthless People was a little harder because it was a comedy, but it wasn't a satire. So there were more arguments, because that movie could have gone in different directions. You know, different filmmakers could have made different films, whereas I think, you know, Airplane or Naked Gun, there was really only one film to be made of that. Anyway, and also I think that when we started, we really didn't have the courage. I don't think if either of us, any of us, had come out here alone, we would have ever had the nerve to direct a film on our own. You know, so it just took a while for us. As I said, we didn't come out like with, you know, directing really takes sort of a lot of kind of nerve, or it takes some bravado, it takes some confidence, which we didn't have, you know, individually, I don't think, but we did collectively, and but yet directing alone, at some point, it is nice to make all the decisions. It is nice to make the film you want to make, and it's you know, it's a mixed thing. I mean, I enjoy that, and I've liked that experience, but on the other hand, it was, I don't know, doing the three of us was great, you know, so it's both good. You have the mic, so go ahead.
One of the things I was struck by watching it tonight was how well so many of the jokes have held up, and you were saying you didn't expect that it would be around for decades.
Yeah.
Did you consciously do this mix of jokes to really try to balance it between these very specific, that you have to get the reference, versus it seems incredibly balanced.
Yeah, I don't think we did that purposefully. I mean, because we were we weren't thinking. We just wanted the people now to laugh. We weren't thinking about years from now, you know. But I think that one of the reasons it holds up is it's really, a lot of it is just, as I mentioned before, it's a satire on a style of acting. And so that kind of thing holds up. The stuff that doesn't is, are the lines that are specific to a commercial or a television show or a movie, you know, and even some of the movies like the Saturday Night Fever, you know, that movie has, you know, held up, is still with us on DVD. So to the extent that we pick those movies, we're all right. And I think a lot of times certain things skirt by that even if you don't know the reference, it passes. You know, that joke is gone and we're on to the next. But no, it wasn't something. It was something that happened, but and I agree with you. But it was not purposeful.
Not to be over repetitive, but I want to thank you very much for Airplane and Naked Gun and everything. They were all depressingly formative for me.
Yeah, I apologize. Yes.
One thing that struck me when I was watching is that, you know, me and my friends used to goof around, you know, because we watched Airplane a lot and make kind of spoofy home videos. And there were a lot of gags that seemed like they were the kind of things that we would have added just on the spot, like the Mayo in the back of the Mayo Clinic was the kind of thing that somebody was just like, we're setting up the set. Well, why don't we just get as many jars of mayo as we can? Or like Johnny and all his kind of antics. And I want to know how much of the humor was there on the paper before you even got other people involved, and how much of it was just kind of spur of the moment, oh, we can do this with what we have? About
99% was scripted. It's nice that it looks, you know, like and that's kind of the loose style of it in a sense, although it really isn't loose, but most of it was scripted. Even the stuff that Johnny said, but it's interesting. That was a guy named Steven Zucker who used to be in our show in Kentucky Fried Theater in Los Angeles, and he, you know, has his own particular style of humor, and we really couldn't write for him, and so what we would do is we would call him up and we'd read him the setup line, and he'd just come up with the punchline. You know, and he was just really he's just like that. I mean, that's Steve. He's not a really serious guy who says, yes, I can play that character. You know, this is kind of was him, and so we'd say, okay, they're saying, you know, what does the plane look like? And he goes, oh, it's like a big Tylenol, you know. And he's, you know, and a couple lines were things from our show, you know. What can you make out of this? Oh, I can make a hat or a brooch or a pin, you know. So it's you know, but yet it was scripted. In other words, when he said it, and we liked it because our feeling was the things that would work were generally things that had been in the script and stood the test of time, you know, because a lot of times the problem with improv, it seems so funny at the moment, but then is it really funny the next day or the next day? And it's you know, and a lot of times the answer is no. There was one thing I remember that was added was we had written in the script was the slapping of the woman, this hysterical woman, but I think that was it. He just slaps her and leaves her maybe, and then Leslie slaps her, but then we added on the set, we added the thing of all the other people waiting in line with a gun and the whip and the whatever. So that was, there were a couple things, but really in all our films, particularly the satires, were very, and we really wanted people to stick to the script, you know. We didn't. I think as long as you said that no more questions, I'll just keep talking, okay? Because I didn't want to. This is like anyway. We could take one more. He had a question that he just was dying to ask here. Okay, go ahead. I mean, I'm fine. If you're, I don't know. You guys you guys probably sleep here anyway, right? Okay.
It's kind of a half repeat of the directing question about it being your first movie directing. But first I want to say I appreciate the many levels of humor in Airplane. And from silly to absolutely completely silly, and probably a year or two.
A wide range.
Yeah, probably a year or two ago at TCM, they had a day of those airport movies and 0 Hour, and there was one with John Wayne and Robert Stack. I think it was called like House in the Sky or something.
High and the Mighty, or
maybe it was so Airplane.
Yeah.
As I was watching
Yeah.
it, I realized,
The Crowded
oh my
Sky.
God, Robert Stack.
There's a ton. We watched all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went back and I rewatched Airplane after that, and it was just I so appreciate the levels of it because when I first saw it, I was like 8 and had no idea there was even this genre.
Yeah.
But the other thing was I was just curious about.
You weren't into genres at 8?
Well, movie lover for life. But
Yeah.
High and the Mighty. It was amazing. It was hilarious. I went back and read it because of that. But
well, if you ever have a chance to go back and look at, to watch 0 Hour, it's pretty shameless because I mean there actually is a line where the story we bought the rights because we took the story. We didn't know anything about plot, you know, and so it has the same plot. It's a guy in 0 Hour he's chasing his wife who's leaving him because he can't make a go of it because of what happened during the war. Right. Of course, in that movie there actually was a war that it was, you know, that he was referring to, but and then there's food poisoning and the whole deal. But there actually is that line in 0 Hour it took verbatim where he says, you know, the life of everybody on board this plane depends on just 2 things: finding someone back there who not only can fly this plane but who didn't have fish for dinner. And you know. Stole that verbatim, not a line change, and it just must be funny if I don't know if Hall Bartlett, who wrote that, ever saw, you know, Airplane, but it's you know, it gets a big laugh in Airplane, and you know.
I was curious too about it being your first time directing, and the 3 of you, all 3 of you, your first time. How much, if any, that you rehearsed. How you approach the actors like Robert Stack and Lloyd Bridges and said, hey, we loved you in this, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then how was it, if what you remember of your impressions directing it when you were actually shooting, were you guys crazy nervous or were you confident by then? Was it a fun set or was it really serious? Or?
I don't remember sleeping a lot the night before the first day, but we were, I look back at it as one of the most fun experiences in my, you know, career. It was just exciting and a blast. And not that any movie you're always like, oh my God, when are we gonna? This isn't working, or is this going? But you know, but the, you know, the actors in terms of how we got them, you know, some of Howard Koch was helpful because he sort of, you know, was. Respected, you know, and told these guys that we were okay. A lot of them, like Peter Graves, really didn't. He actually thought this script was atrocious, and he, you know, but Howard got all these guys to meet. It was actually Peter Graves' wife loved it, and his kids, you know, thought it was great, and they were sort of encouraging him. And he said, "Why do you want me? Why don't you want one of the big, like Dom DeLuise or one of the big, you know, well, you know, at the time he was a bit, yeah, I don't know if that's the right name, but whoever was in the, you know, Jack Lemmon, I don't know, Walter Matthau, whatever. But we said, you know, we said no, we think you'll be funnier and we explained that we just wanted to play it straight. We wanted him to be just like he was in Mission Impossible or Fury or any of these shows that he'd ever done. And they were all kind of different. Peter Graves is a lovely guy, wonderful, wonderful guy, and he didn't really completely get it, but he loved it later, you know, when he saw it. And his wife was just hysterical in the screening, the first screening after the movie was finished for everybody, but he kind of was just totally cooperative, you know. So we would tell him a lot, you know. Okay, say the line, you know. Then say this line, look up, say that line, then look down, then look back, you know. Like particularly with the little boy, you know, that's kind of tricky stuff, and so. So we really explained to him when he could look at him, because if he looks at him and says, "Have you ever seen a grown man?" It's not going to work, you know. so he kind of has to say, Joey, have you ever seen a grown man? Anyway, so you know, but he was totally cooperative and played it just like, you know, and it was great. Lloyd Bridges was a little different. He was the one, and Lloyd, I think, is fantastic in the film, but you can kind of see that he was the one that wanted to be funny a little bit. You know, he was the one who I think I felt was had the most trouble controlling, you know. But in the end, it kind of worked, and it was fine, and it gave us different levels, and so I like. In a lot of situations, you know, we had some argument, but it worked out great. And he was also a great guy. He was a great guy, Lloyd. So and that was already great. That was good. Robert Stack was a good. Robert Stack is not really a comedian, but he got it. He got it, and he looked. And there was one moment actually in rehearsals where Lloyd Bridges was, you know, asking, now why would my character say this line? You know, it's like trying to think about it, really think it through, like an actor's role. You know, this is not, you know, Stanislavski will not help you here. But but Stack just, you know, and we're kind of still young, rehearsals, young kids, still, for us all, you have to understand these guys were major stars and heroes for us because we grew up with all of them. But Stack just said, he said, Lloyd, who cares? There's a spear going in the wall behind you and a watermelon falling in front of me. Just keep talking, Lloyd. Nobody's looking at us, you know. And you know, which was great because he really, you know, his Stack was just, he kind of, you know, he knew, he said we're the Stooges, but he was willing to do that, you know, and thought it was appropriate and all, and lovely guy, Robert Stack. And then Leslie Nielsen, who I remember the casting agent couldn't understand why we wanted Leslie Nielsen. He kept saying, Leslie Nielsen is the guy you go to the night before. And, you know, and when you can't get anyone else, and we said, no, he's got that, you know, he's got that thing. It needs to be perfect for the doctor. And Leslie Nielsen was the one that was a fish in water. Leslie said later, I would have paid you guys to do this. But I think he meant it. And Leslie, it's interesting, people always ask, were you surprised that he was so good at comedy? And my reaction is really, you know, no, I was more surprised that he did drama all those years, you know, because he really is a nutty guy. It's not like he's a serious guy, but hey, he turns on a thing and he can do comedy. He's a nutty guy who can get into that serious mode and be the captain of the Titanic, or the what's that movie? The movie where he says, "Oh my God," when the tidal wave comes. Anyway, before we're done, someone has to think of the name of that. Poseidon Adventure. Thank you. Okay. But Leslie was a joy, and he was an anarchist like we were.
What about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
Well, Kareem was great too. We actually wrote the role for Pete Rose, but it was during baseball season, so we couldn't get Pete Rose. And so we decided to cast. We decided Kareem would be good. We'd go after Kareem, and so we went to Kareem and. I think we offered him $25,000, and his agent called back and he says it's got to be. He wants 30 because he wants to buy an Oriental rug and it costs 30, and that's the only reason he'll do it. And I thought to myself, this is the greatest line I've ever heard from an agent. I said, I want this guy to represent me, you know. And so, you know, but we really, really wanted him. And of course, even $5,000 was on a $3 million movie was a lot. So we said yes. We're so excited to have Kareem. And like 2 weeks later, there's an article in a little blurb in Time magazine featuring that shows Kareem in front of a big Oriental rug that he had just bought for $30,000 at some auction. So who knew? But Kareem was great. It's funny. Kareem was not you know, a skilled actor, but he was also lovely, really a good guy. Kind of, you know, it took a bit to get to know. You know, he's not like gregarious a bit. He's a little more shy around people. And of course, your neck. I mean, he's so tall. But I grew very fond of Kareem, and I actually just saw him a year ago, and it was fun. And he says that he always, you know, every time he goes on an airplane, people, you know, like the pilots invite him up to the cockpit or whatever, and stuff like that. And I thought that movie must be really powerful if they're inviting a guy named Kareem up to the cockpit in this day and age. But no, he was great, and you know, really lucky to have had him in the movie. It's hard to imagine without him. Yeah. Tell us about Otto. Otto, yeah, Otto. There actually there were two Ottos. One of which I think is rotting in my basement. But anyway, the I don't know how much you think it'd be worth on eBay, but yeah, but actually mine is the female one, because what they did is, we didn't, once again, low budget. There really was only one that did the main one that was used. The second one was only for it was like a more of a balloon, like a little bit more like this kind of a thing, where when she when it takes it out, when it's released from its seat and it's sort of grabbing her and stuff like that. But the one that I have was the Otto, but it's repainted to the female face for the end of the film. But that was a clever deal that they made the head swivel, and they figured out how to make it bounce up and down and all that stuff. So Otto was fun. So I guess on that note.
Yeah.
But thank you. You guys have been. I actually ended up really enjoying this. Thank you. Thank you very much.